Hi friends, family, and folks. Thank you so much for joining in and for tuning in. So today I get to share with you my yoga practice really. And it's altered to what would be traditional to some. But I'm inviting you in with regards to what I do with light, what I do with positioning, and what I do with a sense of bringing one's awareness to consciousness. Some might refer to such thing as contemplation or contemplative prayer, meditation. So I think any term or language or lexicon that you want to adhere to, please alter it for your own sense of divine, really. So for me, I like to bring in my ancestry and a sense of the divine first by ritualizing it with light. And then I'm going to go through some movements with you that are similar to that of the tradition of yoga practices. And I would love it if you'd come along. So what I tend to do, and it's often dark when I do my yoga because it's usually earlier in the morning, so the effect of light is even greater. And I tend to put on, a playlist that I have in the background for my liking. And so what I do first is I light a candle. And for me, this represents north. And for me, it's important to symbolize the north, west, east, and south. And so when I light the one that is north, we typically look into tradition in the North Star as being that of guidance. And so when I light the North Star, I'm going to try that light again. These are new candles. When I do that, I tend to take a moment for myself where I just really open my heart center. And if I'm by myself as opposed to in communion with you, what I'm really doing silently is at this point I give thanks for all of that in the world that we call the divine. So for me, I'm inviting that divine force of the universe, the force of life, into my space and letting it know that it is truly welcome here. And so however way you might do that in your practice might be different than mine, but that's what I do when I light the north candle. I come over here to symbolize the east candle, and east is about beginning your day and about the morning star. And so the morning star has quite theological significance for me. So when I light that, what I like to do is open my heart center. At this point, I give thanks for all of those forces in my life that have symbolized that bond of parent to child. And so that's what my Eastern morning guiding star is about the fact that we do recognize we came from somewhere. And so if that's your earthly parents, in my case, my earthly parents are gone. And so for me personally, I bring in my earthly parents when I do my prayers at this Eastern Star. I bring in the parents of my heart that have gone forward, like Avis Fuller, I bring her in. I bring in Harry Stefaniak. I bring in my Uncle Wilford. I bring in my Aunt Martha. I bring in my cousins that have gone forward as well, that are of a older, more parent-like style. So that's what I like to give significance to there. And then I have a light over here that I signify as my south. And as I light my south candle, in this area, what I give the allegiance and prayer and space to is kin. So I would like to live in a world where in the entire world we treat each other as kin, as brothers and as sisters. And so I have many brothers and sisters that have gone forward through the dying process before me. And so I take a moment to call those sisters and brothers into my space and let them know that they are welcome in my life as a sense of guidance and as a sense of love. And so those are almost too many to mention on my personal level, but it's hard for me not. But I start at Murray, and I bring in Patsy, and I bring in David, and I bring in Elvin, and I bring in Wayne, and I bring in Peter, and I bring in Kevin. And I say, please help me to live my life next to you as brothers and sisters, and certainly in guidance that I will treat stranger and friend alike as kin. And so then this one would be my west one. And when I light my west one, what I do it for is all the friends in my life. And so that loving force in our life that is akin to friendship. And friendship is such a beautiful chosen relationship, because it is like kin and it's like brothers and sisters, but it's chosen. Makes it very special. And so I take in time to honor those friends that have gone before me and have entered what I would call the spiritual life and spiritual realm. And I take a moment to thank and to pray for those that are here living with me now. And same with all the other stations, for those that are living and for those that have gone forward. So I usually do that much quicker, but in the appreciation of explanation to you of how I make my setting, that's how I do it in the morning. And so then I go to my yoga mat, of course, and I start with my toes together, my big toes together, all my other toes spread apart, and a bit of a space between my heels. Without going through it step by step, but if you've been following the program, I do some positive posture. But I'm learning to do positive posture while I work, while I sit, while I do yoga, and while I do prayer, whenever I'm conscious of it. And so that's enjoying the fact that we are well supported wherever we are. And you can do this seating, by the way, and I will do other yoga videos where I modify it for you from a seating position. But you know, where I have my arms out, if your arms are tired, modify it. Bring your elbows in and do your hands out. If you're sitting and that's too difficult for you, do it with just the palms of your hands. There's ways to modify this for yourself that you still can get great benefit. The other good thing about yoga is it's not about how far you go into the pose. So if I do a bend that's completely bent over, that's how far my body goes until it feels the benefit of yoga. Another person's body might be to go 3 inches. And if you feel a bit of engagement and awakening in those muscles, then you're getting the benefit of yoga. So it's not about how far, it's about feeling that, what's the word I want? A little bit of friction, a little bit of awakening in the muscles. And at the same time, we're looking at expanding spirit and breath. And so for everything that I do today, that I'm going to try to talk through while I do it, please remember that it's done probably faster when I do my own practice. So anyhow, toes all apart and ankles are angst, meaning I've woken them up. Calves are cocked, knees are knitted, thighs are tightened, abdominals are zipped, undercarriage is supported, buttocks are a little bit activated, and zip up the abdominals, which really supports the spine. Shoulder blades are in the back pockets. Lead with your heart, open that heart center up to everything life has to offer. And head is on the shoulders, and don't lead with your chin. So if you want to keep that in mind, we start, although I'm going to take my glasses off. We start all of that again, just sort of that positive posture reset. And then hands go together above your head, palms together in the prayer position. And in this moment, I just take a moment to give thanks for all of those souls that have guided me in a parental fashion. And because I've had the fortune of having really good brothers and sisters, both by family and by blood and by friends, I take a moment to go to the left to give thanks for all that love that we have that is like kin and brothers and sisters that guides us. And it does a good stretch of the side body. And then over to my right, so your right. And at this moment, I give just a thank you to the fact that we have intuition, we have gut instincts, we have ways of understanding the unseen. And I give thanks to that and homage to that. And then palms up towards the sky and open. There's a slow opening. And I reach the energy out past the tips of my fingers. My chin is up and my eyes are open. And this I call the receiving position. And as I'm in this receiving position, what I'm doing in my heart is saying, I welcome the divine into my life this day. And I also support the divine in my life. I don't let it fall away. I respond to it. And so this is to symbolize holding space for that of the divine, and to give honor and to recognize that it is holy. And then as my palms turn forward and my chin tilts down, then I turn my chin all the way over to the right. And when I turn it all the way over to the right and I put my energy and gaze out my fingertips, my eyes are open and my chin is up. And I take a moment at this point to give thanks for the kin in my life and to know that we will not find what we need until we start to treat each other as kin. And so I take a minute to just tip my chin down and to close my eyes and to hold space for all the times that we collectively in society and in history and certainly individually where it is that I have forgotten to treat people as kin. And then I bring my chin up and I open my eyes in more of a receiving symbolism to say, the kingdom will be here when we can treat each other as brothers and sisters. And then that chin comes back towards the center and back up into that receiving position, eyes and chin, eyes open, chin up, palms up. And in that receiving position, I try to take a moment to say, guide me. What is your guidance today? What's really beautiful is I hear all kinds of things in my heart when I do this, when I'm not with company and trying to guide you along. But you can take a moment if you can, and you're doing this along with me, to take a moment to say, I welcome guidance from that of the unseen into my life this day. And sometimes I get answers, right? Sometimes not. So let's see what your practice does as you do that. And then as palms come forward and chin comes down, and all the way down into what I like to call the forgiveness pose. This is a really nice stretch in your forearms that work really hard for you. Chin goes down, and at this moment I give homage and give a moment of space to the fact that there are times that people have had the opportunity to help me, and they haven't. More importantly, I've had the opportunity to treat people like kin, and I haven't. And I take a moment and space to reflect on that so that I can grow from it, learn from it, and perhaps change as I go forward. And speaking of going forward, I get myself into the open position, palms forward, chin up. And that's at a moment where I take a look out for all those souls that have come here, now, in past, present, and future, where it is such that forgiveness is required from my heart to theirs. And I take a moment to offer that forgiveness to myself and to others. And then chin goes over to the left, chin down, and eyes closed to say, I do wish for this day to be very careful not to choose any path that is destructive to both myself and my well-being and to those that are following me. And then the chin comes up, the eyes open to signify and symbolize that I hope to be guided to paths and to make choices of paths that are good for me and those that are watching me and following me. And when we can do all of that, all of once, and put it in the now, that is when we will have the glory and the power of creation within us, around us, and about us. And then palms face completely out, all my energy goes out both my palms, and I push that energy out. And as I'm pushing that energy out, what I'm asking for is please protect us. Protect us from that lower self of selfishness. Not that that's always a bad thing, but more like lack of soul, lack of soulfishness, let's put it that way. And lack of wanting more as opposed to enough, as my niece says. And also greed, right, and envy and jealousy. I just push away all those things that don't serve me nor others. And then when I get to the middle, I come into prayer position. And whenever I'm in prayer position and I come out of it, I like to just twirl my fingers as such. And when I do that, what the significance is that I'm taking my inside vulnerable parts and I'm offering it to the space around me, to the life around me, and to those around me. And as I do that, I also try to just slowly bend one vertebrae at a time, all the way down. And what I'm feeling in my heart in contemplation, if you'd like to join me when I do this, is to recognize that there's times in life in which we need to surrender. We need to bend, and we need to allow what's going to happen to us to happen. My palms are flat on the floor. Make sure your knees are bent, and that you just straighten those knees to the amount that's good for you. And what I do like to do is just to do a couple of gentle expansions of the back of your legs and stretching of those hamstrings and calves and being a good stretch in the back of the knees, just to whatever your ability is. And I typically do 3 of those. And the reason I do that symbolically for me is to remember that even though we surrender, we also have to sometimes push back. We have to push back on certain things. And that causes tension in our lives. And then if you take a good look at my hands, what I do with my hands at this point is I slowly roll them up. And the significance of that to me is sometimes you got to bend almost over backwards sometimes to help yourself or people. And then you'll see my fingertips just here. And my gaze of my eyes is just comfortably down and in front of me. And what we need to remember when I'm in this pose, I try to say to myself, I need not deal with anything but what I'm given today. One day at a time, folks. One day at a time. And so when I come out of that pose, I put my hands back down flat. I come back into what many people in today's world would call the plank. And in this plank, the neck is kept subtle and straight, and my gaze is down. And at this point, I just take a few moments, and you can feel tension in your whole body. And that symbolism for me is to remember sometimes we have to suspend ourselves. We're not here and we're not there. We're in the journey. And it's okay sometimes to feel the need to suspend yourself. And then I try and go back, just hover those knees above the mat slightly, and then down. And this is tabletop pose, and when I get to tabletop pose, it is said in some cultures that your middle finger is your power finger. So I try to make sure my middle finger is facing straight forward. All my weight is suspended on my hands and my knees. And then you do cat and cow. And when you do cat, oh, this is cow. When you do cow, the idea is to let that vulnerable belly just sag. We hardly ever do that in our society because heaven forbid we look like we don't have a flat tummy. So let that belly sag, let that back arch, and it's really good. Your spine likes to move, your chest and heart is open, and your chin is up. And then you do the opposite, and you do the cat. And you take that tailbone and you tuck it right between your legs. And what I like to symbolize, as I do almost 3 of everything in this practice, is that sometimes you gotta arch and really take the weight of the world on, and sometimes you gotta hump that back and let the weight of the world off. Put your tail between your legs and leave the situation. So sometimes again, you gotta take the load on for yourself and your loved ones and those around you. And sometimes you gotta let it go like water off a duck's back. Put your tail between your legs and leave the situation. And then it is always important wherever we progress to in life that we remember to turn. So this one is to turn and to look, and use your gaze to look at your tailbone. And I'm turning it to the right as far as I can, gently, and my eyes are gazing at my tailbone. And we go to the right 3 times and to the left 3 times. And what I'm contemplating and reminding myself symbolically as I do this is don't ever forget to look behind and see where you were, both to measure where it is that you've been and where you are today and to celebrate your wins, but most importantly to remember to look back to see there's always someone following you, and what can you do to help them to get from where you were to where you are. And then I'm just going to bring my hands forward slightly, tuck my toes under, and we're going to go into down dog. Before I go into down dog, if you're doing this for power and strength, you can take a moment and pause with your knees just slightly hovering above. I think that's called bear pose or something. And then just slowly bring those knees up. And you feel a really good stretch back in the hamstrings and the calves. And then I just walk that out. And again, symbolically, the number 3 is very important. So I do 3 walkings, like so. And then once I'm done the 3, I bend my elbows and flatten those shoulder blades so that you get a good stretch between the shoulder blades. Just like so. And sometimes the symbolism of that for me is sometimes you got to give a little bit. You got to bend those elbows and just give in and surrender. Now this next pose is really quite interesting, but if you bring your right foot way up high into the air and then let it collapse over to your left. And that gives you an incredible stretch to the side body. And I really don't know what my symbolism of that is, but when we're done holding that for a little bit, we sweep it on through. You can drag it up on the mat, and it comes right in between your hands. And when you get in between your hands, I drop that back knee down, and I just take a moment to rock back and forth 3 times. It gives you a really good stretch through the hamstrings, and it really stretches out your hip flexors. And those are important because they carry lots of stress for us. So I do that 3 times, but the symbolism here is sometimes you got to go backwards before you can get forwards. And then I take a moment, and you can just see where both hands and my feet are. And the symbolism here is to remember that we do have a past, we do have a present, and we do have a future. And I like to believe that your past, your present, and your future are with you all the time, and that you are guided by all of them. Every time you go into every step of your life, just remember that we have ancestors in our past, we have our present, and I believe we have a spirit and an intuition that guides us into the future. And my position here is almost like a race, and I like to think of it as a race when I'm here, to remember that today's is like a race, and I'm going to do my best. And I'm guided on either side. That back foot goes from the tip of my toes, and I turn it back into a stabilizing position where I turn it sideways. I come up off my fingers, and I come into, actually I don't do that with my back foot. It stays back on my toes. I'm on the back, I got my toes curled under, I guess. And this is like a receiving position, like so. And what I love about this position is I like to take a moment in this position, and it's okay to shake. That means your muscles are building. And what you have is your right and your left hands, and the palms are open and facing up. And as I slowly bring them together, what I like to remember is one is my physical and one is my spiritual. And I bring them closer and closer together as a symbolism to remember that I am a spiritual being having a physical experience. When I bring them together, what I then get is prayer. And as I slowly bring it from the top down, my contemplation is to try to remember to pray throughout the day. And when I get it down to about heart center, you'll see me slowly turn, and I pivot on my back foot. I go into that stabilizing position, and I turn my hands slowly. And the symbolism there is that I try to pray, and that today is the gift. And today the sun goes from the east to the west one more time. And I've gone from the east to the west. I take a moment to spiral those fingers to symbolize, to remember to make my vulnerability be known and my gentleness known to others, and to give that as an offering. And then I come back, and this is Warrior 2. And we are spiritual warriors, I think, in many ways. And when I look backwards, I try to take a minute to go, wow, was I ever guided everywhere I went throughout my life in all those days? I take a moment to make acknowledgement of such and to give thanks. I turn my chin towards the middle, and that reminds me that that must mean I am not alone here at the present. And so in the present, I take a moment to feel the spirit, feel the divine, feel it here with me in this room, and I hope you can feel it with you. And then my chin goes forward, and I look over that front right hand, and when I look out over that, I think I will be guided as I go moment to moment into the future of this day. And then it's important, and my symbolism is to just bend forward, and I call this leaning in. Just get my hair out of the way. But I lean in, and I lean on that front thigh, not all my weight, but half of my weight. And I look up, and I gaze up over that left hand. And I think when you lean into your faith, you lean into your intuition, you lean into your gut instinct, you lean in, and you look at your hand, I like to remember that we are guided. And then my right hand, if you're advanced enough, you can slide it down your shin, and then it goes right beside your right hand. And I try to remember that we are walking with the Spirit. Same thing. My foot is my physical body, my hand is my spirit, and they are together. And then I keep that chin over my left hand, and I watch that left hand closely. And I watch it make a straight line. And I believe You spend your day in prayer and in communion with the divine, your path will be made straight and clear. And the symbolism of this one is that if you do that, I put my hand right on my thigh and I remind myself, you will be guided and you will be touched by the Spirit. And then chin goes up and you go into what we call the crescent. Right hand is stretched over. What I like to think about it at this point is, if you have watched your path, if you've paid attention to the divine, there will be a point in the day where you will be touched and you will give gratitude, because there's no other way to do it but have a grateful heart. So that's my welcoming of gratitude in the day and my reminder that if I follow the divine, I will be brought to a place of gratitude. And what you'll notice is my right hand, the palm is up. My left hand, the palm is down, to signify light and dark. Everything is birthed out of light and dark, not just one. It's the yin and the yang. So then I take a moment and turn that front palm over. And then my hips, that pelvic region, I pull back on it. And in this area, what I like to think about is, as I pull back, there's a lot of tension there. I like to think of it as pulling back on the string of a bow. And an archery term, meaning sin, means that when your intention and your actions do not match, then you don't hit bullseye. And we used to call that, in an archery term, they would say sin, 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 if you didn't hit bullseye. And so when I pull back on that bow, which is my hips, I lean forward in my faith, and then I let what I call the Holy Spirit, the Creator, the Divine, I let it completely guide me. And when it guides me, I feel the wind of this and I become like the arrow. And what I have is my left hand, my right hand, and my head. And that's like a pointed triangle. And I feel as though I try to contemplate being an arrow, that once that string is pulled back and it's released, I'm off for the day. And I let the winds of change and the winds of the Holy Spirit guide me. And if I can do that with vulnerability, chances are this arrow's hitting bullseye today. It's a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of trust. And I stay here and I breathe into those back ribs, really important. Some really nice, I can't do it while I'm talking, but I usually take about 3 really good breaths in each pose. And then what I'm going to do is keep my eye on the prize. I'm going to keep my eye on that back left hand, and I'm going to keep my eye on the Spirit, and it's going to guide me today. And when I let it guide me and I give up control, chances are I will be literally touched by it. And when I'm touched by it, I'll be brought to nothing more than the gift of a grateful heart. And so here it is that I give praise and gratitude. And then when I swing back down into what I forget what they call this pose, and I do the lean in, and I do this one a little quicker because I'm just doing reverse engineering of all the poses I've been in. And I remember I do not walk alone, as I have my hand by my foot. I am guided, and I springboard back up out of that, and I come into Warrior 2, where I remember to give thanks for my guidance in the past, to recognize and acknowledge that I have guidance here in the present, and that I will be guided moment by moment into the future. And then I swing that back left arm around, and I just prop that foot back up from the back, spin it around and pivot onto the balls of my feet, and back into this position where I remember to pray throughout the day. And when I get right down to about here, heart center, I remember to spiral myself from the inside out, to offer vulnerability to that of the Spirit and the Divine and of myself and those around me, that I don't always need to be right, but rather in right relations. And so here I am in my racing position again, where I have past, present, and future guiding me. And then I bring that back knee down. And here I like to go into the pigeon pose. And what I like to show in the pigeon pose when I'm doing my right leg is that it's like a check mark. And for that reason, I'd like to say, if I pay attention to the needs of others today, chances are I'll get it right. And so this is my check mark to remember. It's not always easy to help others. Hence the pigeon pose. It's not always easy to stay in this pose. So my hands are flat, And then I like to take a few moments, and usually I'm paying attention to my breath when I'm not teaching it. And I come up onto my fingertips and I make sure that my heart is full of courage and open for the day. And then I also symbolize by coming down, making a space that's like a triangle between my index fingers and my thumbs. And in that triangle space, which the triangle is one of the strongest of all structures, it's the number 3, which has significance theologically: body, mind, spirit, past, present, future, hope, faith, love. And I put my forehead right into that triangle. And just take a moment to surrender to the fact that I do not have control of most of this life. And then, not like I forgot about you or anything, but that's a nice place to hang out sometimes. Okay, and so then I come back up here. I position on right and left with my hands. I bring that position of pigeon pose back into tabletop. When I'm back into tabletop, I repeat my cat and cow in the way that you see me do it here. That I remember sometimes our backs get very heavy with the load of the world. And sometimes we have to take a moment to tuck our tail between our legs and let it run off of us. It's just our ego that thinks we have to carry everything all the time. We don't. And so we let that go off of us like water off a duck's back. And then if we can just hover those knees up above the mat for a moment or two, and then right on back into down dog. And then once I'm into down dog, I take a moment to be here. And I also take a moment to picture it as a mountain. You can see I have a peak up where my pelvis is. And I like to think of this mountain as in there will be mountains in our day today. There will be things we need to climb over. But what I do here is, if you watch my knees, I tend to bend them down a little bit to remember, if we bring ourselves to the challenge, there will be footholds. And so at the back of my knees, if I were climbing this like a mountain, that's my reminder that there will be footholds put ahead of me. I will have something to step on that will slowly rise me up to the top of the mountain. And when we're at the top, we need to remember to look for those that are at the bottom. And then from here, we just take that left leg up high, and then collapse it over to the right, and just feel that stretch through the entire body. And then bring it on through and sweep it along the mat. And then you bring it up in between your two hands. And so then this is where we are in the racing position, to remember that we have a past, present, and a future. And to know that when we have all of those in the right place and in the right space and in the right breath, we call that now, where all 3 of them mesh at the same time. And then that right knee goes down, and just remember that in life, sometimes it's not always a straight path forward. You have to back up sometimes and go forward and take another run at it. Back up and go forward, take another run at it. And just remember, whatever challenges you have right now, we don't usually fail. What we do is we stop trying. So just remember, it's not always your first run at it. And speaking of runs, that back knee comes up, and now I'm in that racing position that I like to contemplate about today is like a race. Not to mean that you need to busy through it, but to mean that there's going to be times you're tired in it, and it's a bit of a marathon. You got to keep going. So then I stabilize that back foot on the balls of my toes. I rub my feet. Hands come to right and left. Heart center is open. And here I symbolize my physical self and my spiritual self, 2 entities of myself. And when it is that I can put them together, combined with my breath in the day, it is a reminder to pray throughout the day. And my knee is just a shaking. So good for you. And this, I like to remind myself that the earth, when I turn, I remind myself that the earth is taking another spin today in its orbit. And I do my fingers, bring them to heart center, twist them open to represent all vulnerability and gentleness to be known to others. And remember that we have a past that we give thanks and homage to. We have a present in which we're thankful to live. And then the chin comes forward to represent that I will be guided as I head out into the future of each moment of this day. And as I go through this day, I do a lean in of my faith. I rest here to remember that I'm resting in faith, and to know, as symbolism, I will be guided. I take right a hold of that shin with my hand, and I slowly guide myself down. And with my hand beside my foot, I remember people that are masters. In my case, one of the masters is Jesus, and that he did come to walk with us in human form and in spiritual form. And I keep a gaze up at that hand that's above me. It's not an easy pose, and it's a reminder to keep my eye on the Spirit. And as the Spirit moves throughout the day, and I keep my eye on the Spirit, it will make my paths straight and right, and I will be touched spiritually, and that shall bring my heart to a grateful space. And I take a moment to give praise and gratitude for what I am about to receive. And then as I straighten that front leg out, I come into triangle pose, my hands one up, one down, in symbolism of all creation is birthed out of darkness and light. We need the yin and the yang in our lives. Front palm goes down, pelvis goes back to pull back on that bowstring. Lean out and over in a leap of faith. Let whatever spirit is that you call your spirit guide us. And then we represent that straight arrow by the right hand, the left hand, and the tip of my skull, I guess, the tip of my head. And if I let that spirit guide me, chances are I'll get bullseye. And I keep my eye on that top hand as I reverse all the poses in a little quicker fashion. And just a reminder, I'll be touched by the Spirit. I take a moment to give praise and thanks for every moment, and for even just one of my loved ones. And just a reminder, all those kinks and sore spots that I'm working out, when I feel them and I'm not in a teaching mode, I stay in them and say, oh, and I ask for healing. I say, oh, please heal that. Please heal that. For me, and I hope you have the same experience, it's extremely healing. And I try to do it as often as possible. Back into my leaning into faith and giving thanks that I walk with the Spirit, and I reverse back out of that, and I give thanks for all that's been in my past, that of my present, and that of the guidance into the future. I take that back hand and I swing it around. I hop that back foot in, and I'm back into Warrior One, I think this is. And the symbolism is to remember to pray throughout the day. And I've twisted my back foot down so that I'm on the ball of my foot at the back. And remember to take a moment to let people know the real me, my vulnerable self, my underbelly, as they say. And then I bring myself back down in remembrance that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, body, mind, and spirit, love, faith, hope, by symbolism of two hands and a foot, and to remember in this race of life, I have lots of support on either side. And every place I go into, past, present, and future has been there before me and has guided the way. My back knee goes back down. I come back into what I would call tabletop. And I like to take a minute then at this point to go into what we would call a plank. And I take a moment to just hold myself in the plank and remember that it's important to take a balcony view of your life. a top view of your life. What's going on? So that you can have a bigger picture. And then as my back knees go down, and that both my hands will be really on either side of my chest, I lower back down to remember that sometimes you got to submerge yourself right into, of course, life, but also into those challenging areas of life. And in some cultures, it's called your third eye on your forehead. It's your intuition. And in this point, I put my third eye right on the ground, and I take a moment to remember that sometimes you just got to go with your gut. You just got to go with your tuition. And that's the symbolism here, is to submerge yourself, jump right in, go with your tuition. And then you'll see me ready my hands, because I'm going to come back up into what we call the cobra pose. You can do that basically at any level that you feel tension. So here's quite tension enough for me. But I also open it right up to the top of my hands. I straighten my arms. I'm on my knees, kind of. And I take a moment, just because it's really good. Your body loves to move that spine. So it's a really good stretch of the belly as well. And then I just curl my toes under a little bit, move myself up a little bit, and then knees come off the floor. Actually, I put my toes under. I shouldn't say that. I have them on the tops of my feet. And that's when I bring my knees up and I suspend myself. And the reason I do that, it's quite a strenuous pose, is to remind myself that sometimes you're neither here nor there. You're in liminal space. And liminal space is difficult. And it's really difficult to open your chest while you do it and put your heart forward. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength. And this is my symbolism of that, is to rest in liminal space where you're not here and you're not there. You don't quite know where you are. And then I put my knees back down. And let me tell you, those knees going back down is heaven. And then I'm going to bring those glutes of mine and my buttocks right on back. I'm going to take both my knees and put them on the outside of my mat. I'm going to bring my big toes and put them together. And this is the reward position, people. This is called the child's pose. And the reason it's reward is we need to become like children. I could go on and on about that. Becoming like children, the child pose. This is a good resting position. You can have your elbows on the floor. If you want a bigger stretch, you can bring your elbows up, walk your fingers forward. And I like to feel that stretch all under my arms, and then I walk my fingers to the left to get a good side body stretch. And I walk, and I usually stay in that a little longer, but I walk it to the right. And my symbolism there is sometimes your answers aren't the middle of the road. You got to go to the right, you got to go to the left. Sometimes you got to drive in the ditch for a while. But I try to get a really good stretch here, and that's my position there where I try to remember it is important to become like a child. And what is a child? Children have so much to teach, as we all know. And so the wisdom of a child. And in the wisdom of a child and going out of the child pose is I slowly bring my legs around. And for me, I sit cross-legged. And when I sit cross-legged at this point, I bring my palms up. And my reward is to spend time with that of the divine. I don't know what name the divine wants. I have no idea about the divine. What I know is this, is when I sit this way and I close my eyes to the distractions of the world around me, and what I do, and I'm called to teach this, but it's very difficult to teach. But what I do is I certainly do all the things we've already done, and that is, I try to zip up those abdominals, I try to support that spine, put my shoulder blades in my back pockets, and open that heart center, keep my head on my shoulders and don't lead with my chin. So that's my positive posture. And then I sit with my hands open and I just take a moment to quiet my mind. And what I do is I say, I have come. And the moment I do this, and I'm going to try to do it with you, is I sit here and I say, I have come. And you can see I'm smiling already. I say, I have come. And the reason is because I feel that entity I've come to. Now, this is just me. It doesn't need to be you. But if you're interested, this is how I do this. And so I say, I have come. And what I feel is an entity sitting right in front of me. And what I feel is that entity with its palm above my palms. And I feel an exchange back and forth, a giving and a receiving. And I'm happy to be doing it. And I believe that entity is too. There's a communion here. And I always feel like I miss this spot. Doesn't matter how many times I come to it. Doesn't matter how long I've been away from it. When I come to it, I think, oh goodness gracious, how lovely to be home. And so here it is that I say home, and I usually sit here for a little moment and feel it. Sometimes I have humorous times, sometimes I cry here, sometimes I smile here, sometimes I'm scared here only because I'm called to do things that are very challenging. But I take a moment here and I often get a focus for the day, and I often get a service. My focus can oftentimes be written down wisdom that I'm drawn to look up for the day, and it guides me. And I have to tell you, the magical blessings I have are without, they're unspeakable is what they are. They're unspeakable. So let me see if I can do this at this moment. And it's called your Dharma, by the way. Another way to do this is to sit and say, where's my Dharma? What's my purpose? What's my purpose today? Is my purpose to put the garbage in? That's my purpose. Is my purpose to go call on Aunt Rita? That's my purpose, right? So I sit here and I have a bit of communion, I have a bit of joy, I have a bit of visiting back and forth. And for today I say, what is my focus? My focus today is to love my sister. Well, I have more than one sister. I have 3 sisters. I know which one it is, though. It's my sister Sharon. Shh, don't tell her. Okay, so my focus is to love my sister. Oh, she's trying to love me up good today. I already know that. I think we're in a love fest and a love competition, so I'll have to figure out a way to love her. Okay, so love my sister, and that's my focus. And what's my service? Oh, no, that's not my focus. That's my service. What's my focus? My focus is great. My focus is to have fun. I've already had fun. I hear that a lot. So is this just myself talking to myself? Perhaps. I think not, because there's way too much magic in it. But anyway, that'll be the end of my prayers today, in the sense of contemplative prayer here on the yoga mat. And I will continue to pray throughout the day, I hope. And so I end that by putting my hands at heart center, bringing my outsides and my faith outside of myself with the courage to share it with others. Amen. Shante, Shante, Shante. And Namaste. Thank you so much, friends, family, and folks. I know that was a long one, and I hope you stayed tuned. I hope you can use it as a practice. It's changed my life. I'm happy to share it with you, and hope you tune in again.